you are probably thinking right now, what is evolutionary psychology? And that shows that you're observant people, so thumbs up to you. Although, I want to play a little game before we begin. And what this game consists of is me asking you a question, and that question is, what is your most recent fear or anxiety? And then with that information, I'm going to do something. I'm not going to tell you just what I'm going to do yet, because I think you guys will be able to figure it out. So do I have any volunteers? What is your most recent fear or anxiety? Yeah.
Slides.
What?
Slides.
Slides?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're afraid of going on a slide, I presume like playground slides, right?
Yes.
So you're afraid of going on slides because you're afraid that you could fall off or potentially get hurt, and maybe even something that could be fatal. Do I have another volunteer? Yeah.
Driving at night.
So you're afraid of driving at night, obviously, because you're afraid that you could get into a car crash or hit something that, again, could result in your death. Now, if you don't know what I just did, is I related these two fears to death. And this is the basis of my talk, that all of our fears, if not, or maybe most of them, are rooted in death, that all our fears and anxieties are rooted in death. So how does this relate to evolutionary psychology? Well, if you don't know, evolutionary psychology is Charles Darwin's phenomenon of evolution in a psychological aspect. And what that means is that we are predisposed to behave in certain ways and feel certain ways because it has been successful for our ancestors before us. So, hence, evolutionary psychology's biggest flaw is that all our fears and anxieties are rooted in death. Because if you're afraid to die, you're more likely not to die because you won't partake in a risky behavior. Now, when I was choosing my TED Talk, I wanted to make something really close to my heart. So I know you're thinking, well, you're just talking about death and evolutionary psychology, and now Batman's here. And the reason Batman's here is because a few years ago, when The Dark Knight Rises film came out, we all remember what happened on June 10th, 2012, the shooting at a Colorado movie theater. Now, I was so excited for this movie, and I was so hyped to go. And me and my dad had even gotten tickets. Now, when the day we were supposed to go came, we got to the movie theater, and about a little bit before halfway into the movie, I made me and my dad leave the movie theater. And that's because I suffered from an anxiety disorder. Now, I know it might not seem evident right now, but if you would have spoken to me 2 years, you would be able to notice that I was indeed anxious. And I realized that through my journey of coming to terms with my anxiety and marginalizing it, I realized that most of my fears and anxieties are indeed rooted in death. Just as the example of making my dad leave the movie theater with me because I was afraid that a gunman would come in. Now, before we get into any more stuff, we need to talk about self-actualization. Self-actualization is a psychological phenomenon created by Abraham Maslow when he created his hierarchy of needs or hierarchy of motivations. And what this means is that self-actualization is the #1 motivation. It's at the top, but it's also the hardest to reach. And self-actualization pretty much means our feeling that we have reached our full potential. Now, I know for some anxiety and some fears, it's not evident that they are directly related to death. Although they might not, for example, the two examples I got earlier on were directly related to death, for they could result in you dying. Although some anxieties and fears could be related to dying without reaching your full potential. And that's where self-actualization comes into play. Now, again, before we get into anything, we need to talk about why we fear death. So obviously, we fear death because we're afraid that we will no longer be able to partake in all the good things in life. For example, love. Now, okay, and just to give you an example of how rampant anxiety is in the world, this histogram shows anxiety disorders compared to affective disorders and substance use disorders. And this graph is from Australia. And as you can tell, in all age groups, anxiety disorders are exponentially more rampant than any other disorder. And that's where the terror management theory comes into play. Now, when I was creating my TED Talk, I stumbled upon this, and it pretty much elicits everything that I believe. So the terror management theory states that all of our behaviors and actions are in an attempt to suppress our fear of death. Now, an example of this is shopping. So for all you women who like to go shopping a lot, and I'm not trying to be sexist, but perhaps you're only going shopping because you're trying to marginalize your fear or anxiety of death. And I know this is kind of abstract, but if you think about it, we might not consciously know we're afraid of death, but we're still trying to suppress it. But the only problem with this is once we're done on partaking in the activity that suppresses our fear, that fear will once again arise. And that's where Julie Beck comes into play. Julie Beck is an author for The Atlantic, and she says that more suppression simply leads to more suppression. So a lot of activities that suppress fearing or anxiety could be religious activities, such as praying. Now, again, if it's working for you, good. If you're no longer fearful because you pray, then continue doing that because that's helping you be less fearful. Although, as from the terror management theory in my example of shopping, once you're done praying, it's very likely that the fear and anxiety will once again arise. And therefore, there is a better, superior way to deal with this fear and anxiety. And I will get to that later. Although, a way just to give you solace about your death is to embrace the unknown. Now, if you're a very religious person, then Hindus believe in reincarnation, Catholic people believe in hell or heaven, and some people just believe that you sit in the ground. But that's kind of interesting in the sense that you should believe that you should try to find out what truly happens when you die. Now, we don't know what happens, and you should embrace that, because not only is it interesting to find out, but if you are definitely someone who is a devout religious person, then perhaps you will believe that you will go to heaven, and there's a probable chance that you will get to heaven, just as there's a probable chance that you will end up in the ground and just rot. Now, Eric Olson, and I know that's a morbid idea, but it's probable, and we have to accept that. Now, Eric Olson is a developmental psychologist at the University of Yale, and he argues that we should not fear death, but rather we should fear that decline of health, or the process of death. Now, we shouldn't fear death because it does not directly affect us. We are not affected by death while we're alive, and once we're dead, we're obviously not affected by death. Although that process, that decline in health, is obviously nerve-wracking, for we're humans, and once we're in that decline, we will be anxious. Although, and here's where my big solution comes into play, if we are able to somehow accept our death, we can marginalize our fear and anxiety and no longer be inhibited by it. And if we're no longer inhibited, then we can make every day count. And I know that's a cliche, but that's a cliche for a reason. Because if we make every day count, then when we're on our deathbed, and when we're going through this process of death, we'll be okay with it because we know we made every day count. And one of my favorite of Eric Olson's quote reads, "The aversion to death is like the aversion to having a hotel room on the 13th floor. Both are based on false beliefs about what can do us harm. Because, like I stated before, death can simply not do us harm once we're alive." So, in preparation for my talk, I read a fantastic novel, which I suggest to everybody, entitled Tuesdays with Morrie, and it's by Mitch Albom, and this is Mitch. Mitch Albom, and this novel is about him, had a professor named Morrie when he was going through university. And after university, they pretty much ceased all contact. Although one day, Mitch saw Morrie on the news, and Morrie was expressing what he was going through, for he had been diagnosed with ALS. Now, due to this, Mitch felt so bad that they had not spoken in so many years, that Mitch decided to meet with Morrie every Tuesday. Now, throughout this book, Morrie continually elicits the fact that he is not afraid of his death, but rather he's afraid of the process of dying. And a quote that elicits this is the quote by Morrie that says, "One thing I truly fear is not being able to wipe after using the bathroom." And I know this is kind of vulgar, but if you think about it, he is afraid of that decline in health, him not being able to voluntarily move his body. Although he's not afraid of dying, for he knows he has made every day count, and he has accepted that he will soon enough die, as he does at the end of the novel. Spoiler alert. So Sheldon Solomon, another developmental psychologist, only this time working at the University of Stanford, recently wrote a book, The Worm at the Core, on the role of death in life. And a quote that elicits the entirety of the novel is the quote, "Americans are the best in the world at buying or burying existential anxieties under a mound of french fries and a trip to Walmart to save a nickel on a lemon and a flamethrower." So yes, it's a funny quote, but it goes back to the idea of terror management, or the terror management theory. The idea that we continually try to suppress our fear and anxieties by doing detrimental things such as gaining weight and wasting money, whereas if we can simply just accept our death and come to terms with it, then we'll no longer be inhibited by that fear and anxiety, and we'll no longer have to do detrimental things to suppress it. So all of Ms. Blum's students know the book The Stranger by Albert Camus, But existentialism is this philosophical idea or ideology that life is meaningless for it ends in death, although we make life meaningful through our choices. Now, The Stranger is a novel who follows a main character named Marceau. Marceau simply does not care about anything in life. And it's argued that he simply doesn't care about anything because he knows that his life ends in death. An example of him not caring about anything is early on in the novel, his mother dies, and he seems to be unaffected. And then, later on in the book, he even kills a man and seems unaffected, goes to jail, goes to trial, and is even sentenced to be killed. And again, he doesn't seem to care. Although, close to his death, he begins to realize that he is nervous, and he begins to be nervous about his death, and he even, near the end, comes to terms with his death. And this displays that although he wasn't nervous throughout his life, that we are humans, and near death, we are going to be nervous, because that's just what we are. That's what we were made to do. Although, if we can simply, like I stated, accept our death, then we'll know we had made every day count, and we had embraced existentialism, and we are our choices, just as J.P. Stark, an existentialist, says. We had made every day count and made the right decisions. Now, one of my favorite quotes by Julie Beck, who, again, writes for The Atlantic, is that death destroys a man, but the idea of death saves him. Ian Foster once wrote. I don't know if there's really any salvation, but if we accept death, maybe we can just live. And that's correct. If we accept death, maybe we can just live. Maybe we can just make every day count. So next time you're nervous about something, try to think how it can relate to self-actualization or how it relates to death, and realize that, you know what, maybe if I just give up on this fear and anxiety and just embrace my life, I can make the proper choices and I can make every day count. Thank you.